thing that actually bothers me about gerrymandering, and honestly, it's something that, like, so I'm, both you and I, we're lefties, right? We're pretty much both you and I are to the left of the Democratic Party. Like, what bothers me about the Democrats, among a lot of things, but what bothers me specifically, it's like, okay, so gerrymandering is a big deal. It cost, in the last, not in 14, but in 12, it specifically did cost the Democrats the House. There was more people voting for House Democrats than House Republicans. So nationwide, like, there was more people who cast a vote for their Democratic House member than Republican House members. I think in 14, the Republicans did have a slightly more. But anyway, and also when you talk about all the horrible things that are happening on, like, a statewide level with all the governors and all the crazy anti-choice, anti-abortion bills that get passed, all the anti-union stuff, all the stand your ground stuff that gets passed in all these states. In reality, so much of the battleground is actually on a state-by-state basis. And we do actually have a census coming up pretty soon. Why isn't, like, I almost think like the National Democratic Party, their main thing should be like, we need to take back the governorship in all these states, and we need to take back the state houses in these states, because when it comes to the actual census, which actually theoretically, draws the lines for where these congressional districts are, if you have these Republicans who do these crazy ass gerrymandering, if they're still in power come the next time it comes around, which is again in 2020, right? If they're in power, same thing's going to happen, or it even's going to be worse. So this would actually be something that, like, should be front and center on the National Democratic Party, because it not only affects it on a state level, it affects it on a national level when it comes to the House of Representatives. And you hear it occasionally, but you don't hear it a lot.
I absolutely agree. And these guys who are coming up for potential Speaker of the House or potential whip, they're coming from these state elections, from these, from where you can get a crazy Tea Partier elected, and now they're on a national stage, and they're shocking the rest of us who don't often travel to backwoods areas. Although McCarthy is from California, so you don't think of a lot of backwoods areas in California that would have that kind of thing.
California is a big state. There's a lot of backwards areas in California. People just think like, San Francisco, LA. California is gigantic, and there are some scary people in California.
I used to live in Oregon, and I used to say, and it's just, north of California, and I used to say Oregon is a couple of blue dots surrounded by people who have shotguns telling you to get off their land. That kind of folks, like tires on the front porch with dogs on chains and stuff, like with a lot of libertarian idealism. And
meth, and tons of crystal meth, like people without teeth. I know, I lived in Portland too, and it was like, so Portland, you literally have like Portlandia, right? Like the show is like a documentary. Like it literally is like this, it really is what Portland is like. And then outside, you're in like Bumpkin Land, and it's like, it's actually really, it's like night and day, where you're like, oh my God, I remember when I lived there, I went outside of Portland, I'm like, I'm in Nebraska now. It's like, I know these people. I know these people who are on crystal meth and don't have any teeth. These are my people. I need to get out of here now.
And the fact is, like, when you live in New York City, there's at least an hour in all directions before you get there. When you live in Portland, it's like 10 minutes outside of town.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of shocking. I want to get back to a point that you made earlier that I think is very important about the state level elections. And I do think that has something to do with the current media system, getting local news. I mean, I was asked to do a comedy show here in town that covered electoral politics and what's going on in New York State and how crazy it is. And I had to go out and do research about what's happening in my own state. Okay, I know I'm well spoken on what's happening, across the board in national politics, but what's happening in my own city and what's happening in my own state? And we have New York One here in New York, which is, a great local channel that does cover what's happening electorally, but there's not a lot of independent media that is focused on locality. So New York One is, a corporate media entity, although they're probably the best we've got here. They're NBC, ABC, they have a local news broadcast. Those are still corporate entities. You don't hear how, they're basically dropping in an LNG port off the coast of New York City on those channels. You hear about the murders and the fires, but you don't really hear about the true politics. You don't hear about movements. You don't hear about anything you would hear about on, an independent media outlet. And I think that's I think that that plays a role here in people being more aware of what's going on nationally than they are about what's going on in their own backyard.